So I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about what makes a really good book. And they were relating it to another topic. But when you think about what makes a really good book, overall, you have to have a good story. A good story keeps people entertained in the book. And then what makes a good story would be good chapters in the story. Then what makes the good chapters? You would have paragraphs. So really good paragraphs would make really good chapters. And then what makes a really good paragraph would be the words of the book. So you have the words, the paragraphs, the chapters, and overall the story. And that is what would make a really good book. And I thought that is quite similar to CAM programming too. In a CAM program, you could have a lot of really good stuff, a lot of really good toolpaths, but one could ruin the overall performance of the program. So if this was relatable to CAM programming, so you think of the story, which is sort of the very top level. You need a good story for a good book, and that would be the I would relate it to like the methodologies of the program. So your overall story that we're telling throughout a CAM program. So that is, are we going to be doing it in one op? Are we going to be roughing and finishing? And one area of that could ruin the rest of it. So if you go straight to finishing and don't do any roughing, obviously that's not going to go very well. Or if you go straight to part off without finishing, then you've got the same thing there. And so overall, you need a good method of the part. And then I would say going into the chapters, so the chapters that make a good story. So the chapter side of it would be your sort of program groups. So how you are going to rough the part. Are you have you done something wrong in the roughing? Because this could then make finishing worse. So if you've roughed a little bit away, or you've gone too aggressive with your roughing and you've gouged apart a little bit, that's going to really affect your finishing, because no matter how good your finishing program is, you've got a mark on the part now from your roughing. So you need really good groups. So your roughing needs to be really good, your finishing needs to be really good, and if you're parting it off or whatever you're doing for the next op, your holes or whatever, that also needs to be really good. So your chapters would be your program groups, and every part of that has to be really good for a great program. Then when you're going into the paragraphs of a book, so paragraphs make great chapters. And when you're thinking about a CAM program, toolpaths would make great groups. So if you have your roughing group, then all of your toolpaths in there also have to be really good, because if your first roughing path is way too heavy, or your step overs, you've gone way too aggressive on your step over, you could be getting tool breakages. So the individual toolpath itself could really affect the whole group. And you could say the same for finishing, because you could have 90% of your finishing group done really well. All of your toolpaths are really good in there, but it only takes one just to ruin it. You might go too deep towards a part off, and you might accidentally part the part off when you don't mean to, or you might go too thin with the part off, which means your finishing is going to vibrate. So you need a really good toolpath, and I think that's quite relatable to a paragraph of a chapter. And then when you're coming down to the words level of the book, so this is the very fundamental part of a book. We're not going into like letters, but really great words can make really great paragraphs. So I would compare that to all of the small details within the toolpaths, within the settings. You're looking at your non-cutting moves and every small detail. You can't have a great toolpath without really going into the full detail of the toolpath. And this is what is going to set you apart as a programmer. If in most companies, you've got 90% of programmers in there who are quite mundane and doing the same thing over and over again. They're creating a toolpath and they don't really care about the engages or the retracts or traverses. But what can set you apart as a programmer would be looking into these small details. So, making sure that your engages are as small as they need to be, making sure that your traverses, are you 5 mil above the job? Are you 20 mil above the job? Do you even need to go above the job? Are you traversing to a part which is also on the same plane? Can you go direct? And then, going finer details again. Are your non-cutting moves, are they sharp cornered? Is there any way we can do arcs? This is going to affect the machine's performance. If you're doing a lot of small moves with sharp corners, you're going to get juttering on the machine, and this is what sets a program apart. So you can't have a great program without getting all of these small steps right first. If you've done everything right and 99% of the program is great, but ultimately, some of your non-cutting moves are a bit wasted, the part isn't going to be affected at all. The part is going to be exactly the same, but you know in your head that you haven't done all that you could have done to make this program absolutely great. So that is what is the difference between a great program and a not so great program, in my opinion.